An immense explosion. That was all that was heard on June 9th, 1906. That tragic day, one of Lancaster County's worst accidents occurred. Shanks Ferry, specifically Bowsman's Hollow in Conestoga Township, used to be a bustling place in the earliest days of the 20th century. A dynamite manufacturing facility owned by C.R. McAfee Powder and Oil Co. made these woods its home in this era, but this home was short-lived. At 12:42 p.m. on June 9, 1906, the punch house, where dynamite was stored, tragically exploded and completely disintegrated the entire building. The nearby nitro plant also met the same fate. 11 men perished in the explosion that day, and 9 others were injured. The Lancaster New Era soon dubbed this tragic event the most horrible accident that has ever occurred in Lancaster County. The explosion was so loud that it could be heard as far as 15 miles away from the facility. Joel Hawkins, a Conestoga Township resident, has been exploring these woods since he was 6 years old. He was able to show me exactly where this tragedy occurred.
We're in Bowsman Hollow. This is the site of the dynamite factory that blew up here over 100 years ago now. This is about all that's left is the site. When they made the gunpowder, in the process, some of the gunpowder shook down through the cracks in the boards in the floor. And after about 3 years or so, there was enough down there that someone created a spark. And nobody knows how yet, whether it was 5-gallon drums or whatever, 55-gallon drums. Somebody made a spark and it went up. And all the young men were killed. This is the marker for the dynamite factory. And it was placed here by the Historical Society to honor the men that lost their lives in 1906.
The descriptions of the search that followed the explosion is something straight out of a gory horror film. The Lancaster New Era description was as follows. For the dead, not even the last mournful services could be performed, for there was little left of the victims. A couple of big holes in the ground where the explosion occurred, and the burning buildings, with debris scattered far and wide, was the most that could be seen for a while, though in time came the relatives of the dead and injured, and the scenes that occurred were of too harrowing a nature for description. Gruesome bits were found here and there, pieces of flesh being found on trees, but all the searchers found on Saturday afternoon and Sunday were remains that could be contained in a bushel and half-bushel measures. The largest part was a head, part of a shoulder and an arm, the face beyond identification. A mass funeral was held 3 days after the tragedy at Colemanville United Methodist Church. One victim's remains, that of Frederick Rice, was placed in a casket. The other 10 victims had what was left of their remains buried in one grave. The memorial reads, "Our boys," followed by the names of the victims.
My grandmother's brother worked at the dynamite factory. Apparently he was 18. And my grandmother lived in Colemanville and walked up the hill that day to bring his lunch. And the thing went up and she never delivered his lunch. Her name was Maud Funk. Her brother was William. He's number 2 here on the list.
We'll never know what exactly happened in the punch house that day, but even if answers sprouted up, it would never alleviate the grief and horror families experienced in the days and years after.
It's a tragedy, an 18-year-old boy with the world ahead of him. It's just too bad.
If you travel to Shanks Ferry today, specifically Bowsman's Hollow, beautiful woods will fill your visit. It's hard to believe such a tragedy occurred here, but sometimes history haunts the most beautiful places.